Welcome to Beyond the Fine Print, the podcast where we help you simplify the ever-evolving world of commercial laws and technology and answer the major questions facing lawyers today. I'm your host, Rory O'Keefe, and in each episode, we'll be breaking through the jargon so you can stay ahead, keep it cool, and take control back. Now let's get started.
Welcome to Beyond the Fine Print. Today's guest, Sarah Derbyshire of Baringa. Now, if Athena and Queen Maeve, that's the Irish context, had a child, who could build legal from scratch-ish, pilot AI with grace, and co-found a network that actually moves careers, all while radiating calm, drive, and a smile that says, I've got this, it would be Sarah. In this episode, you'll learn how to cut contract cycle time like Athena wielding a Gantt chart, why reversibility turns resistance into applause, and where lawyers need to say, not today, robot. Whether you're building legal from scratch, nudging legal processes, or wondering if your AI pilot is negotiating with a coffee machine, this one is for you. And if your career path looks like a festival of snakes and ladders, you're in excellent company. So as Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, said, our industry does not respect tradition, it respects innovation. Sarah lives this truth. So let's dive in. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Rory. I'm delighted to be here.
I don't mean to offend your parents by saying you're the child of Athena and Queen Maeve, but anyway, there you go. Before you get into trouble, apologies to your parents. So, very good. But let's start straight in. So your career has definitely been what I'm coining as a squiggly career, but very exciting. And this is the reason why I wanted you on this podcast for everybody to hear. But let's just start with the things that I know that our in-house listeners are particularly interested in is going into some place that has a setup, but you're going in new. So it's kind of like let's start with your origin story. I don't mean the X Factor story going back to your dot. I'm talking about day one at Baringa. Let's pretend there's no playbook, it's high stakes. What did you do first?
Well, it was quite a change. Technology and consulting firms were familiar to me, but day one felt different, and it continued to feel very different because what was very different was the fact that the entrepreneurial open mindset that they talked about before I got there was real. And that took some getting used to because from an institutional kind of lived experience, I wasn't really used to actual full license to be creative. And so it took a while to adjust. And so day one to day 100, I was really acutely interested in just listening and learning, being curious. I spent time with multiple different stakeholders, like the playbook, right? Everything that you're supposed to do. But I really needed to do it because in a kind of a hyper growth environment, we are expanding internationally. We're now in over 20 countries. There was a lot to learn and it was a completely new culture, a great culture. But in terms of practical steps, apart from just spending time with different types of stakeholders and understanding our strategic growth objectives, I then just got into the mechanics of it, like with the legal team, who are like a fantastic group of people who had been working in the foundations of Baringa to kind of get it to where it was. But of course, what got us here won't get us there. So there was a recognition from them, from me, from the leadership that we needed to kind of really rethink our operations to enable us to get to the next phase of growth. And so we sat down and we mapped just really simply service catalog, like what do we do today? Why do we do it? What don't we do? And then your kind of classic 2x2. I mean, who doesn't like a 2x2, right? So where are we doing it? And what's the value? What's the risk that we're mitigating? So we had a couple of different lenses. And then we did that for a couple of the other pillars that I was kind of inheriting, so risk and compliance. And then that's the foundations of the plan, right? Because you can see quite quickly we were spending quite a lot of time using our precious resources in areas that weren't giving us as much value as we needed. So we could think about how we could rotate into the top right of those 2x2s and really get into the work that we needed to get to. So yeah, and then you overlay that with like the strategic ambitions and you get a different lens. And so that led to just a proposal which kind of iterated, developed, tested with stakeholders, and that became the plan.
So what I find is like it was great for you. I haven't heard it across all NSOs when they're going in as like in your case, you're going in and there was already a team there, a solid, enthusiastic by the sounds of it, team who are open to everything and anything that's new, that's got to make everything more fun and clearly cutting out the stuff which is dragging everybody down, which is always the best thing that anybody could do, make their lives easier. that's a great place to start from. And there's a lot of in-house lawyers that wouldn't have that kind of luxury to start from that. They actually might be the only person. And they're creating something new, and they have to persuade people to relinquish some things they've done before. And it takes time, takes effort.
Yeah.
The one thing I saw, which mentioned to me before this, I'm allowed to state, is that you cut the contract cycle time by 40%.
So that's one of the cool things we did in the first year. There's another cool thing which I'll come on to, but one of the things we needed to do pretty quickly was to get out of the business of organizing workflow, which was happening in conversations, in teams, in emails. And so our commercial legal team, who were incredibly busy, was spending a lot of their time just kind of organizing their priorities. And so we did the classic thing, or let's just implement a legal front door. Let's take the key questions that we know we always need to ask. Let's digitize them. Let's build a tool. Very, very fortunate to have incredible in-house technology, digital data folk. Co-created a contract request form, which is just self-service. How do we initiate contract review requests? We built in the kind of sanctions checker into that process and launched it. And it enables real-time tracking. So we're processing now about 300 contracts a month, client contracts. And that process, where we looked at the data over 2 6-month periods in our sort of first year, led to a kind of an increase in volume throughput of about 200%. So we were just getting through contracts faster because our lawyers were spending less time in their inboxes. Now, that's not revolutionary, but what was really exciting about that is how quickly we did it. And that goes back to the kind of innovation mindset I mentioned earlier. The environment was right and the permission was there to kind of go fast and try something. And that was great. And then the second thing we did in that first year, which I'm super proud of, is we sort of developed a framework for responsible business decision making. So we were finding that very similar questions were cropping up in different parts of the world in our organization as we kind of took on new types of work with clients. So we pride ourselves on working with clients on their thorniest challenges. And obviously, sometimes that takes us into areas where we're having quite interesting conversations with them. And we developed with the business a kind of guide for decision making with some really clear signals on if something comes up and it looks and smells like A, B, C, come and have a chat to us. It could be the type of client, it could be the location, it could be what we're being asked to do. And it was aligned to our values, human rights, ethical considerations, and of course, just the law. And so we built that, and that was a first for the organization. We're now automating some of the aspects of that, and we did 13 this year, and super proud of that as well. It's just nice to see us living and breathing our values in a way that's understood by everyone.
Yeah, it was interesting because you and I had the pleasure of bumping into each other yesterday, actually, as an AI law conference, and there was something that Lord Clement Jones said on the panel. He said, "There's this concept of value versus values." Yes. And I said, so I was thinking about that afterwards, and I do like that little sound bite that he gave. Was like, you have to look at the value that you're trying to bring, but you can't ignore the values. So what you're saying is you did responsible business on the basis of the value proposition is reducing the amount of time people spend answering the similar questions across the globe, but at the same time, creating something that is linked to your business values as a company. And then it makes it so much easier to sell. I use that loosely. I mean, as in to encourage people to get on board with what you're delivering and then turn it into a real win, which is what you did. I know you know this, but I'm just saying, it's to me, it's another way of looking at it is like when I was looking at how to build a legal team, like if you're first coming in, you look at what's one thing you can kill, one thing you can automate, and one thing you can escalate. When I say one thing you can kill, I'm not saying a person, by the way. I'm talking about a process, right? One process to kill, one process to automate, one process to escalate. So kill, automate, escalate. That's what I was thinking of. But it sounds like you've gone in with such an enthusiastic team to create that, which is a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I mean, very lucky, very fortunate. And like I said earlier, the license to kind of be creative, be innovative was just there. And then it was just about the mindset. So selling it to the business as we're going to save you time. We're removing friction from the deal cycle. These conversations are coming up everywhere. We're spending too much time in our emails. So let's co-create something that's digital that allows us to hide the greens in the food. Let's not bury ethics, but let's just weave it into our decision making.
You hear that? This is the mother talking. See, yeah, that's the greens, the food.
Yeah, exactly.
I
right.
love it.
And so it's about you sell the same message in different ways to different people depending on their interests. We definitely have people who are more focused on just removing friction, and then others who who were very keen to sort of embed a consistent approach to kind of ethical decision making, and unfortunately found a way to kind of marry those two things.
It's great. Well, let's move on to change as the topic itself, because change is easy on paper and it's harder when people are involved, fortunately. So tell me about a moment when resistance turned into momentum. Like, how did you do it?
There were sort of pockets of organization who really valued that like close relationship with their lawyers, and they loved the fact that they were there at the end of the phone and there at the end of the inbox. And when we were trying to push some of these processes, like the contract request form, legal front door, there was a sense from some that you're taking my lawyer away from me. I really like this self-service that I've been used to over the years. Like, they're just there.
Oh, I like this. They love
with
us.
a white towel over their arm and a silver tray, and you're taking it away. Where's my martini? No, I'm joking. But you kind of have to convey that the person isn't going away, but we need to kind of start to standardize the intake of work, and then your lawyer is still there. And so there was that resistance, and I think we see that always at the start of a major change of ways of working, and there's like a couple of months where people are grumbling and then they just forget, and then they're just in the new way of working. Hopefully most of the time, if you've done the analysis right in the first place for the value proposition. But that's definitely an example of where the resistance was there, and then from some, and then just dissipated, thankfully.
And you see, that's the interesting thing, is because it's like we say, people don't resist change. They resist being changed. So it's like trying to convince your grandparents to switch from WhatsApp to Slack. They'll do it, but only if you promise that they can go back. So it's, ease them through the change process. And it's this concept of reversibility.
Yeah.
And it tracks through what I've seen others reported, like Denton's, Thomson Reuters. They're saying reversibility is the new change lever. And the idea is you find out who's blocking, who's backing, and how do you move each? How do you create that psychological safety for them to embrace the change that you're trying to drive forward? And if you give them the abilities that, the lawyer is still there for you. We can still pick up the phone. You still call us, come over to our desk if we have desks. You can still chat to us. We may not be as available, but it's only because the purpose is to get this stuff done in order to create those efficiencies that you've all wanted. So it's
exactly that.
It's kind of like a masterclass in psychological safety that you've delivered to create this kind of shift change, obviously helped by the innovative spirit that you're working with. Very helpful. Look at this.
Wow. I think you're being overly generous there. It's I see it sometimes as just being really open about what everyone's interests are, and then just building concentricity so that actually it becomes everyone's idea, because their interests are being served, because they still want to sell the work, they still want the reduced cost, and so you just start to kind of build consensus in that way.
Yeah, I can still get you that martini. It's just not going to come on a silver platter anymore. It'll come on the same trolley as everybody else's, with their buns and their scones and everything else. But you still get your martini. So.
Yeah, sad times. It's not a martini; it's a contract.
But let's get into the obvious topic that we've been talking about for the last 3 years. I feel now somebody reported to me that it's about 3 years since OpenAI emerged onto the scene. And so we're talking about AI. And so when you were introducing or even reevaluating the AI proposition for the company, what are the things that broke? What stuck? What was your, shall I say, inverted commas, first pilot, shall I say?
Yeah. So about a year and a half ago, we embarked on a review of the landscape. We knew we wanted some tooling that could kind of take us right the way through from intake to negotiation to close. And this is kind of separate to just the legal front door. That was like table stakes at that stage. We wanted something that was much more advanced. And obviously, as you know, the legal tech market and all the players in it, it's just undulating. There's change happening all the time. We've seen huge change in the capabilities of the underlying models. And so we weren't looking at a static landscape by any stretch, like none of us have. And what's interesting, I'm part of a female GC network, is everybody's asking the same questions. Is now the right time to buy? Is now the right time to invest? Because it's like the stock market, because you can see these things kind of like scaling really quickly and changing and evolving. And you're like, do I get on the bus now?
Is it a bubble? We don't know. Just leaving that there to hang.
Well, I'm a fan. So, but we did these two pilots.
I'm a fan too,
right?
but I'm just saying. Price points. Well, let's question this.
That's a separate question.
Yeah. Not for you. I'm just leaving it out there for everybody to listen and think through.
That's a good one. So we did these 2 pilots. We were like, okay, we'll do the scan of the market. Like, let's say there's 7 to 8 different players. I'm not going to name anyone. We picked 2. And then we asked them if we could just use the systems in anger over the period of like a month. And we did that. And actually, it's only once we started doing that we started to spot where things were going to be problematic for us and selected one. And now we're kind of midway through the implementation journey. So we're aiming for a fully integrated life cycle, creation, negotiation, signing, kind of augmented with AI throughout. And I'm sure you've seen the tech. There's some really whiz-bang stuff out there, and we're quite excited by the one that we've gone with. So where we are now is we've got an AI repository, which is live, like thousands of contracts in it, searchable. You can ask it natural language questions. It's got all the clause tagging, dynamic filtering. That's gone really well. Nothing has broken as such, but we've definitely found that the pace of change of some of the products as we're actually implementing them just means that we have to be internally very agile. And actually, it came up at the AI conference yesterday, Rory, that sense that some of our teams, thankfully I've got an amazing ops and innovation team, they're having to kind of lean more into just being technologists as we go through this implementation.
Yeah.
So it's not like one big thing broke and there was like an oh bleep moment. It was more like, how do we continue to just rapidly recover and redesign in a really agile way as these kind of micro problems come up through the implementation? So for example, like, does it integrate effectively with Outlook in the way that we want it to? Okay, it doesn't. So let's do the workaround with the product company to help us achieve that. Can we now hard code it to implement our red lines because we've just changed them? We've just changed our contracting red lines with our leadership team. And that's all something you have to kind of hard code. And sometimes the coding doesn't quite churn out the result that you want. So there's that, which I like to think is just natural. So we kind of have a mindset, if we can internally, of this is just what happens. And it shouldn't be disheartening, because there's definitely some people who, originally at the beginning, at the outset of the journey, were fairly pessimistic about the capabilities. So you needed to make sure that as you go through the journey, those kind of micro problems or micro challenges don't get misinterpreted as, oh, this is not working. This is going to be hard. So therefore, let's not do it. But I'm an eternal optimist, and I think that it's not optional anymore. So finding a way to be positive about it and intentional about it is actually just what every lawyer now needs to do.
I agree. I think there was statements that go around, and I'm sure people are more eloquent than I am to say this, but it's AI isn't going to take your job, but those who use AI will.
Yes.
And the thing about the technology itself, and that for a lot of people who haven't worked in technology, when we're in technology, we say change is constant.
Yes.
But for those who haven't, like they're in traditional legal models, I always say this, and I'm really cruel to people who do probate. I did probate for 6 years, by the way, so I kind of think. But in Ireland, for example, probate, I haven't looked at it in years, but it was based under a 1965 Act. So nothing's really changed since 1965. I'm sure somebody's going to tell me it has changed, the amendments or whatever. Yeah, fine. Okay, thank you. But I'm just saying, it's like some cases, the way of doing those kinds of services changed, but the actual underlying law hasn't changed. So you kind of say, well, if it's not broke, why, what's there to fix? You think, yeah, that's great. But the fact is that if you're not using AI to review all these things, to put in workflow processes like agentic AI in the, not in the direct client facing pieces, but the actual way in which you do your work, the workflow, the things, then you're missing out because other people are doing it. The question I did have always with all of these things, I'm not going to ask you to say because it's difficult, is the return on investment.
Yeah.
So although we put in place all these controls and processes and improve how we're delivering the services, and we check the AI, we check all these things, it still comes down to everybody being able to show some success metric that links to the ROI that says, yeah, despite us spending all this time and money and effort and buying these licenses and educating the masses on literacy, AI literacy, or just tech literacy, and managing tech debt and all these things, you still have to show at the end of it that actually it was worth it. So that's kind of I'm not going to ask you because everybody has a different kind of internal confidential metrics. They agree themselves on the KPIs, the success metrics linked to the value proposition. But I always kind of say to everybody, before you start hitting and pressing yes to all these tools, first they start with what do you actually need, not what you want. It's what do you need? And then how will you measure that against an ROI, because that's what the CFO and the CEO will look for.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
Anyway, that's just my little thing, because like AI is very good at writing lots of things, much better than I could write, I could see.
Mhm.
But if they were writing like a love letter, I'm sure they'll get emotionally confused.
Or they can do
finishing
that
off
now.
that letter. They can, but it's quite interesting. Yes, I love you, roses are red, violets are blue, and yada, 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 and then fill in the blanks. You're going to, great. It's just kind of one thing just to keep in the back of your mind. But anyway,
Yeah.
let's go into you, Sarah Derbyshire. Please explain. So what would you say? Because I mentioned at the beginning, squiggly careers. Now, I have a squiggly career, by the way, so I just put my hand up. I've gone from jurisdictions and also to different types of areas of law. I said probate, criminal law, then moved into corporate world, M&A, moving into oil, gas, construction, then into technology, and now, talking to amazing people like Sarah. So I'm still doing law, by the way, just in case. But let's talk about you. So what about your career moves? Like, what do you feel was your perhaps riskiest career move that maybe got you that seat at the exec table or helped you get there?
Okay, I might unpack that question slightly, because I think there were certainly moves that I made that felt risky at the time. But now when I look back on them, I think I have a slightly recalibrated view of risk. And now I just see them as like really cool things that I've done rather than risky per se. And that's probably just, age. Age and 2 kids will do that to you. I remember distinctly, just by background, I spent 10 years in a private practice firm, a big, brilliant behemoth of a place. And I was litigating there. And I moved in-house into another large but very different organization, a consulting firm. But I was still in disputes. I was different work. So some litigation, arbitration, lots of kind of workouts, strategic resets, exits from jurisdictions, volatile external situations. It was basically like anything that had an external contentious element, working in a brilliant team, as you all know. And then after like 4 years of doing that, I've been like doing litigation for sort of 14, 15 years. I just started to get itchy, and there was like people talk about having like a scratch or an itch that they want to scratch, and I didn't really understand what it was or why it was. And then somebody that I'd been working with a lot on a couple of different sort of cross-enterprise strategic projects just tapped me on the shoulder and said, we need to look at this thing across the organization. We need to like do some work to better understand how and should we commercialize data and AI, and do you want to lean in? Are you interested? And we had like several conversations and spoke to some other people about it, and it would involve an internal secondment. It would involve moving away from litigation and disputes and embarking on this kind of somewhat ill-defined project for a period of 6 months. And up until that point, I think I was probably fairly institutionalized, like definitely in private practice. I knew what I was doing. I knew the role that I was in. Each case was different. It was ambiguous, but you kind of knew what you were doing. Same when I got in-house into the kind of disputes role. So this felt like a big decision. And it was a big decision. It was actually a major turning point, like looking back. And I remember going for a run, and I was running down this kind of like wooded glade, and I remember thinking, like in rapid succession, first thought, I don't know anything about data, not really, I can't do that, I can't do this. And AI, like I know a little bit about it from a couple of disputes, but that's the domain or preserve of really technical people, and I'm a litigator. And I remember sort of going through this run, and at the end of the run I was like, yeah, but it's just like a different case. It's like a new case and a new problem that I'll just need to pick up and work my way through. So I kind of reframed my mindset to get myself comfortable with this big pivot. But at the time, it felt really risky. I was like, what if I can't do it? What if I get to the end of this comment and like my old team don't want me back? And of course, I didn't actually go back. That role, that's a comment, turned into other opportunities. But at the time, it felt like a big risk. Fear of failure, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you were in your comfort zone. You knew exactly how to do a litigation and arbitration and anything else in your sleep. And then you're going outside that comfort zone, which I keep telling people, you need to move out of your comfort zone. If for nothing else, you just get bored if you don't. It was something I'd seen as like, I call a squiggly career. And you're just pointing me to squiggly power, because it echoes what I hear other leaders saying. So detours can be major launch pads.
Yes.
So map your squiggles, price their value, look at that CV. And if it looks a bit like snakes and ladders, which I think generations following me, I'm not going to age you, but following me, there's generations coming through who will have squiggly careers, and they want squiggly careers. They don't want to be stuck in one place for their entire life. And I say it knowing that I have some really close friends who've been coming up to 30 years in the same law firm, loving everything about the law firm, but having no idea, except for their clients that are supporting them, obviously, but they've no idea of other ways of doing things, other ways of working. Some of those have really invested time in understanding their clients so that they can be amazing non-exec directors or consultants, or they could be GCs of somewhere, because they've invested time in actually understanding the differences between running a law practice and running an in-house team, because they're very different. I know there's transferable skills, sure, but they are very different ways of working. And I just say to anybody who's got their squiggly career, just welcome home. Just don't land on a square that's marked fax machine compliance. Okay. Just enjoy it. Right. So I wanted to also talk about the power of networks. And we can talk about networks in many, many different ways. You and I, we've gone down many different paths on this networking and positions, but I want to talk about yours. So what's one network in Baringa that led to that tangible outcome, that win, as you say, that you invested your time? And I would say it in the context that, the Law Society of Wales has said that networks aren't just nice, they're strategic. So I'm not just saying it for fun. I'm saying there are business reasons for networks as well. But I approach networks like you as it's something nice to do, something we enjoy doing genuinely. It's not a side of desk activity for us. So, but let's talk about yours. Like, what do you have to say?
So networking used to kind of bring me out on a hive. I used to, like, the idea of networking used to make me just want to be slightly sick in my mouth. But I think I just had completely the wrong mindset about what it was. I used to think that it was about going to conferences and going to events and making small talk. And I'm actually not very good at small talk. And that was my mindset for a while. And then it dawned on me like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that actually you're building up networks all the time just through natural normal relationships and people that you work with, and then you can be a bit more deliberate and lean into things, and sometimes there's a need to do it individually, and then there's a need to do it organizationally and from a development perspective. So I kind of now have a couple of different lenses on it. And like, none of this is rocket science, but like internally, we didn't have a women's network for colleagues in our kind of corporate function, which we don't call our corporate function. I love that we don't call it our corporate function. We call it Baringa Enablement, BE. And that means we can do all kinds of curious things, like have initiatives called Be Curious, BE. And so we started at...
Do you have a Be Long?
Be Long.
I see. I'm getting on board with this.
Yeah, you're in there already. You're like, okay, I'm going to stop listening to Sarah and just come up with more of those. It's addictive, right? So we've got a Be Women's Network, and it's a really simple proposition. We don't have like excesses of kind of budget to throw at this. So we're really practical about it. And we got everyone together, kind of crowdsourced ideas. What do people want to get out of it? Pull that back in to a kind of group of leads, look at what we could do just tactically 4 times across the year to get that group together to meet those objectives. So we've done things like, I mean, this is super nerdy, but everyone loved it. We did a walking tour around Westminster where somebody kind of guided us through like amazing women from history that have achieved change. And that was very inspirational. And then we do like some well-being stuff. And then we get people in to talk about careers, and we do volunteering as well. So it's kind of multidimensional, serves lots of different needs. And then the external network that I'm really getting a huge amount out of in the past couple of years has been a kind of a female GC network that I was invited into. It's called The Eagles. It was founded by an amazing woman called Leslie Wan, who's the founder and CEO. And so it's global, like they're in APAC, USA, UAE, India now, and it's Chatham House rules. So there's lots of events through the year, and then actually just an amazing WhatsApp group where people just chuck out questions. How do you do this? I'm struggling with this challenge. Have you got any recommendations for this in this country? And there's like spin-off groups as well for all these different subject matter areas, because that's just like real life and fun. So there's like a fertility offshoot and a beauty group, and some people are really into pets. But what's amazing about that network is spirit into which all of the women enter into it. Everybody shares so much with each other freely, like time, calls, suggestions, and I've found it hugely valuable. Like so many difficult questions I've thrown into that group, and you've got like 10 different FTSE 100 GCs coming back at you with, hey, here's have half an hour of my time, or here's my top 5 tips. So I've gone from sort of a slightly reticent, nervous networker to like a big believer and advocate in the right kind of external networks.
But can I ask you an obvious question? So you're asking them questions, but clearly you're at this position in your career where there are lots of people looking up to you and they're looking for the answers from you. Have you accepted yet your role as a mentor, as a pioneer?
Oof.
If you could see her face right now, you'd know exactly what the answer is.
I get slightly uncomfortable with that, but yeah, I think I've made my peace with it, because actually you don't have to have all the answers to lead others. And I think the best leaders approach it with humility too. Like knowing when to ask others, I'll bring them into a situation, is one of the most important facets of leadership. And yeah, I mentor. I get a big kick out of mentoring. Do I loudly proclaim it from the rooftops? No, probably not. But yeah.
I like it. I think that you're doing two things. Is one is the mentoring, absolutely, and the other sponsoring to encourage networks across, Baringa and other spots. And like mentorship for me is like giving someone a map. Sponsorship is like giving them a private jet. That. So one gets you there eventually, and the other one gets you there with style. So it's
good analogy.
So I think it's great, and it's reminiscent from one of our other guests, Stephanie Boyce, who was talking about tables, and when she became the president of the Law Society of England and Wales, she was invited into rooms she never knew existed.
Yes.
And it was like, it's hard sometimes to see, because we talk about ladders and ceilings and bring everybody up and don't pull the ladder up behind you and help others in their trajectory, in their career ambitions. And she said, well, sometimes once you know where these tables are, what rooms, and you should be now helping other people to be aware of where those and help them find their seat at those tables, which is the whole purpose of these networks, which I feel very strongly about. Not that I know where all the tables are in all the rooms, but I'd be still quite happy for some of those tables to be serving the martinis in those rooms.
Hey.
But anyway, that's a really, really nice way to do. And I want to ask you two questions that I always ask all my guests. So one of the questions is, what is the one thing that people get wrong about the work you do?
I think sometimes people expect legal leaders, regardless of their role, right, to have, but particularly GCs, to have total ownership for the legal and regulatory compliance of the company. And you hear it sort of thrown away, a throwaway statement from time to time, but of course that's your job. And it always gives me slight pause for thought, because actually ownership and accountability sits with all leaders, and actually to an extent others within the organization. And so that's something that people often misread, and that I think is a really important cultural message actually to play back sometimes. Keeping the organization safe, doing the right thing. Like, yes, we can be the lighthouse, the core of the compass that sets the parameters, the guardrails, but everybody else has to buy into it and walk the walk and talk the talk. And it comes down to accountability. So that is one thing that people get wrong, that always kind of sets off my spidey senses.
Don't worry. I know listeners right now will be, especially in Hastings, will be going, oh my God, she's speaking my language. Somebody said it. What then, my final question to you though, is what's the one thing you find most fun about your work? You can say other things if you wish, but about your work. And please don't say the people. I've left the people. They're the most fun part of the thing. I've heard that. We all say, it's kind of in interviews, it said, I'm a perfectionist. That's my strength and my weakness. Yeah, sure.
So you're going to think I'm a complete maniac for my answer. The thing that I find, the thing that I find most fun about my job is the work in front of me, and the work that I do with teams, like developing new ideas, testing them, brainstorming a problem, like just attacking a problem. I think all of that can and should be fun. There are some situations that you have to deal with, right, that are serious, difficult, challenging, Thankfully, those are extremely limited. But the rest of the time, and I think it's probably a bit about mindset, I deliberately bring the fun where I can to make an environment where you can really enjoy yourself as you work through a situation. If I'm in a meeting or an environment and there is like low energy and like a flat kind of tone and temperament, I make it my business to try and shift it. I'm not saying I'm like fun time Frankie and I walk into like a meeting room with like a clown outfit on. But I think when you're at work, we spend so much time at work, there's no reason that it has to be a kind of dull, depressing, flat experience. And I kind of want people to show up with a bit of that mindset too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've seen so many people walk into even very complicated contract negotiations, and it's like they found a dead bird on on the ground, and it's you kind of go, guys. We can have some fun here. We can inject some humor in the right spots, obviously. And there's a time and place for everything. But this is, as it always is, it's a dance that you have to do in every single conversation. You can have fun doing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, although I will lead into one secret we did in one negotiation, the other side was not having any kind of fun or humor. Something obviously did happen, and we didn't know what it was. Did you actually
bring a dead bird into the room?
Yeah, it was tempting, but no animals were ever hurt in any of my deals. It's just before I got any complaints.
Disclaimer.
Massive disclaimers. No, but we did have this situation where we said, you know what, we're not going to win them over. So because we all had our internal chat functions on our laptops, Teams at the time, we just sent ourselves little messages, and see who could crack up during the things. The most unprofessional, by the way of doing a negotiation. But after a while, when you've been negotiating around the definition of applicable laws for 2 hours, something has to give.
Yeah, it's just not humane.
So we did have this little trick where there's one person who used the word candidly a lot. So we had bets on how many times the person would say candidly during the meeting. It was just very unprofessional. I'm sure there's an ethics board somewhere that's going to hold me in to talk about this. But it's honestly just injecting a little bit of fun can keep you just alert, but also you're not losing out on anything in those conversations. You're actually winning people over. The whole point of our job is not to tell everybody the risks and say no.
Yeah.
It's about being persuasive and influencing people to a right conclusion, which may not be the perfect one, but at least it's a good one. There you go. There's my little soapbox moment. There you go.
I'm now thinking, did I use the word candidly?
No, you didn't. It wasn't you. You're fine. You're fine. You're fine. No. Honestly, Sarah, thank you very much for your time. I know you're super, super busy. I imagine Sarah as being like Miranda Priestley, the nice version from Devil Wears Prada. But honestly, if you had Athena and had a LinkedIn profile, she'd be endorsing you for strategy, calm under pressure, and making legacy processes disappear with a smile. So you've given us squiggly turns into strategy, tech turned into trust, and change turned into momentum. And to our in-house listeners, which questions are you actually taking into your next one-to-one? And which habit are you retiring? So if your AS starts negotiating with your coffee machine, think of an opportunity there. And if you're still clinging to that legacy process from 2015, consider this your gentle nudge to start innovating and be creative, just like Sarah has been. And so always tag us about what you've killed, automated, and escalated processes. Please, not killing anything else. If you've got squiggly career wins, let us know. And if your favorite AI bloopers, love to hear those as well. So until next time, stay wise, stay squiggly, and step boldly beyond the fine print.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Fine Print. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss the next episode. And if you have any burning questions you want us to cover in a future episode, send them to beyondthefineprint@rmoklegal.com. See you next time.